Marco. Hi everybody. Welcome back to my channel. You already know what time it is. We're here for our Q3 book tag. Yay! So it's kind of becoming a trend at this point that my quarterly book tags come out like at least post 2 months from when the previous quarter ended. Like, you'd think I'd be timely, and as the quarter ends, I record this video so that I can post it in a timely manner. But it's October 27th. Good evening. This video is gonna post, I think, until like November 1st. So Q3 is long over, but we are still going to talk about it because Q3 saw 7 books read. Yay! And now we have to talk about them. I'm really excited. It's good timing to sit down and record this book tag. A couple of hours ago, I got home from my book club meeting for the month of October. And oh, Lydia, shout out. I love you so much, girl. Lydia pretty much kind of heads our book club, and she is responsible for choosing where our meetups are, and every meetup she adds like a special touch, and I just love it. It's just like a piece of love going to a book club meeting. And this month she actually decided to host like a book club Halloween party. So we read My Sister the Serial Killer, so you know, very on brand for October. And we had like a pizza party, and she gave out these lovely gift bags. Oh, it was so cute. It was so cute. And she had food and snacks. And then after book club, we watched Scary Movie, and we were just chilling, and it was a great time. It was a great time. It was a great time. And I was like, okay, you're dressed, you're looking cute, and you still need to record your book tag. So tonight's the night to do it. And here we are. I have my notes here to guide me through the book tag. I have my phone where I track all the books that I read this year, and we're gonna see how this video goes. So if you look at the structure of Q1 book tag, look at the structure of Q2 book tag, and then look at the structure of this book tag, there's no consistency because I don't really know how I want to structure these videos. One day I'll get the formula right. For Q4 book tag, it might look a little bit different, but today we're sitting here on the floor in front of my shelf that I built with you guys in my very first vlog way back in January, and we're gonna just have more of a discussion base when it comes to these 7 books that I read this quarter. Usually I like go through each book title and then like read the description on the back of the book. I don't know. I wasn't really feeling it. Like the last video I posted, I'm just like, this feels very like dry. Like, let's have a conversation. That's why you're here, right? So let's get into it. So we are going to first start with my DNFs. So this quarter was a much better quarter than last quarter. How many books did I DNF last quarter? I had 4 DNFs last quarter. So like last quarter was a really rough go at reading. It's like every other book I picked up, I just was not feeling. I did not meet my reading goal for the quarter. Reminder, I say this in every book tag. I set a goal to read 24 books in the good year of 2024. And to accomplish that goal, if we break it down with some basic math, that means you need to be reading 6 books a quarter. But we are starting with my DNFs. So 2 DNFs. The first DNF would have to be The Dragon Republic by R.F. Kong. This is the second book in the Poppy War series. It's a trilogy. It's 3 different books. I read the first book of the trilogy in January, I think it was. So my review for that book is in my Q1 book tag. And so now I am moving on to the second book in the series. So I actually started the second book in like February or something like that, right? But I stopped reading it after like 3 chapters. And so in Q3, I'm like, okay, let me cycle back to the series. I read the first book all the way back in January. It's time to pick it back up. Let's try to get through the second book. I don't know where I am in the second book. I don't know what chapter I'm on, but if I had to say just like plot-wise, I think I'm probably about a third of the way through the book. And I just DNF'd it. just moved on because it was not engaging me the way the first book engaged me. And upon reflection, now that I think about it, it's the main character. It's the protagonist. It's the setup of this big fantasy land. Like, I like the magic system. I like the story even. I feel like it could be a really great book, and it probably is a great book. You know, this trilogy is widely regarded. Everyone loves it. So, you know, there are people where it clicks. But for me, the main character was really obnoxious. Like, she's very flat. She refuses to grow. She's very whiny. And I'm just all like, I feel like we're repeating the same lessons over and over again, and I'm kind of burnt out on it. Arthur can write a dislikable protagonist. You know, that makes for an interesting read. And to a level, I feel like our main character is supposed to be a unlikable protagonist. But it's not just that she's unlikable. She's annoying. She's annoying. I just couldn't keep going with the story. I ended up Googling the spoilers for the Dragon Republic, and I was all like, nope, I'm glad I DNF'd it, because if I would have read that entire book, and these are tomes, okay, these are tomes of books. If I would have got through this entire book just to get to this, I really would have been pissed, because it's basically a retread of book one. So I DNF'd it. The next book that I DNF'd would have to be The Waning, Age of Realignment by Rumi Armanji. I'm sorry, I'm probably butchering her name. This book was the book club book for the month of July. It's October. And I still... Where am I at in the book? Where's my bookmark? It's October. It's October and I'm still only halfway through this book. So this was a DNF for Q2. And it is a DNF for Q3 because a whole nother quarter has blown by and I still haven't finished it. I've gotten further through this book since the last place I left off in July, but still, only halfway through the book. I really want to finish this book. I really like it. I really, really like it, but it's just kind of been getting, I guess my attention has just been getting pulled to other books that I'm much more interested in. I finished 7, but I couldn't finish that one. And it's just I kept prioritizing other books over this one. I could have finished this book. I just didn't. So hopefully we get around to this book this quarter. So it is still on the TBR. We're going to get through it. All right. Now that we've wrapped the DNFs, let's get to the good stuff. Let's talk about the 7 books that I read in Q3 2024. The first 3 books that I want to talk about are actually a trilogy referred to by the Brown Sisters Trilogy by Talia Herbert. The 3 books in the series include Get a Life Chole Brown, which I rated 3.8 stars. Take a Hint, Dani Brown, which I also rated 3.8 stars. And Act Your Age, Eve Brown, which I rated 3.7 stars. Which, as you can see, 3.8, 3.8, 3.7. The only reason I didn't give the last book a 3.8 is because I was like, I have to dock it at least a point because I thought it was the weaker book out of the 3. Maybe I was just burnt out on way too much romance. That's totally a possibility too. So I read these 3 books. Let's talk about it. These are very middling ratings. Like, I don't feel like they were bad enough for me to rate them a 3, but they were not great enough to scrape the 4. Know that my rating is very arbitrary. It's kind of just how I feel like rating a book once I get done with it. And what I felt like is, on principle, I can't give these books a 4, but they're not as bad as a 3. And honestly, I enjoyed them enough to be higher than a 3.5. So we're going to land on a 3.8. Of the 7 books that I read this quarter, 5 of them are romance books. And I don't know how many romance books I've read this year, 2024. I can tell you that 2023, I was reading a lot of nonfiction. I was in my nonfiction bag. And apparently, this year, I am in my romance bag? Question? To know me is to know that that's honestly insane. Like, I am not a romance girly. I don't like romance books like that. Like, they're just not my thing. That being said, walking into this year, I was like, you know what? You should give romance genre a try, like a genuine shot. My favorite book this year was a romance book. I read it like end of February, beginning of March, right there in that leap year period. Blew through the book. I loved it. 36 hours. I have a whole vlog named after this book. That's how much I loved it. And it was a romance book. And I was like, girl, so if this is what you love, maybe you should give romance a try. So now we're here. I think I took that a little bit too seriously. But let's talk about the Brown Sisters trilogy. First, let's take a sip of my iced coffee in the lovely cup that I got from my book club meeting. It's so cute. It's right on brand. The Brown Sisters trilogy. We have Chole Brown, we have Dani Brown, we have Eve Brown. Each book follows a sister, and each sister is on a path to find love. Like, not necessarily intentionally, but through, you know, the romance drama, they find they love. Chole Brown has a debilitating illness, and she's very self-sufficient, and it's very hard for her to ask for help, and she's very A-type personality, and, you know, she has this list of things to do. Get a life, Chole Brown, because she's also kind of like a shut-in, and she feels like her life is passing her by. And in the process of her ticking off the to-do list on these items, she falls in love. Cute. Then we have, take a hint, Dani Brown. Dani Brown is a professor. She's very, very smart. She's going after her doctorate degree. She's a bit of a workaholic, and she happens to fall in love. Then there's Act Your Age, Eve Brown. She is the youngest. She is very irresponsible. She's all over the place. She's the wild card of the family, and she can act pretty childish. And in this book, she needs to act her age, grow up, really establish herself, like commit to something as a career or as like something to do in your adulthood, because she was just kind of screwing off. And in the process, she falls in love. So each of these three books follow a trope. So Get a Life, Chole Brown is enemies to lovers. Take a Hint, Dani Brown is the fake dating trope. And Act Your Age, Eve Brown is a opposites attract, sunshine grump relationship trope. So that's when like one person is like a grump and one person is like a ray of sunshine, and they find love and balance each other out. Opposites attract type energy. So now you guys know what the book is about. Let's talk about what grinds my gears about traditional romance books. The over-reliance on miscommunication drives me wild. And if an author does this, like, I'm out, and I'm just like so bothered by it. We're just being intentionally dense here. Like, the writer is just intentionally making these characters not communicate for the sake of a plot. And that's exhausting. That's exhausting. I will say that these three books were not very heavy on the miscommunication trope, at least not until chapter 17. But mostly throughout the books, they communicated until they didn't. So it made the books a bit more bearable to read. But in every single one of these books, in chapter 17, there was this big blow-up argument, usually centered around miscommunication. They fought for a chapter, and then the next chapter it was resolved, and then the next chapter the book ended. Not only was the pacing wildly off and like mismatched and unsatisfying, but also it's very pointless. Just let them be happily ever after. And that's something that bugs me too in romance. Like, I get, you know, the need for conflict, but honestly, conflict don't need to be that deep in every romance book. It doesn't. It doesn't. I think these three books would have been served way better if we just ditched the chapter 17 argument that is bound to happen and skip straight to the happily ever after. And then that's the annoying part. Like, they finally get together in chapter 16. And then in chapter 17, they're going to fight. And then in chapter 18, they're going to reconcile. And then in chapter 19, there's going to be a real quick and snippy conclusion that's maybe a flash forward a couple of months, and now they love each other. Like, what? What? Can you give me more of them, like, loving each other and being happy together? Because a lot of these books only cover the span of them meeting and then them getting together. And, like, almost immediately after they get together, they fight. Like, Lesson number 2 for me. You don't need to be reading books by the same author. You don't need to read books by the same author. Now, Tia Williams, I love Tia Williams. I really, really do. She wrote 7 Days in June, and she wrote A Love Song by Ricki Wilde. I hear her voice in both books. Like, her style is shining through, and her style is for me. I am the target audience, okay? But they're 2 different books. Like, they're both romance books, but they're in 2 different lanes. I think romance authors fall into the trap sometimes of rewriting the same book over and over again, just with different characters. And reading those 3 books in coherent succession, back to back to back, I don't think was the best idea. Especially by the time I got to Act Your Age, Eve Brown, I was a bit over the whole storyline plot. So that's just me. Additionally, with romance books, and I think this is the big one, the banter, quote unquote, that exists within literary romance books to fill the pages. I don't like it. Most of it's not realistic. It can get really cringy. And I'm like, who talks like this? Who talks like this? And I guess that's why the romance girlies eat it up. Like, if anything, I feel like a lot of the romance girlies out there live for the banter, which is why it's so much of it. But like, for me, I feel like it slows down the story. I feel like it's unnecessary dialogue sometimes. And then I'm just like, who talks like this? And so it pulls me out of the story. So those are my complaints with the romance genre. I have more, but those are like the big ones that are like the most common, that I'm just like, I don't know if romance is really for me. That being said, I would recommend the Brown Sisters trilogy. If you are into romance, it's a good little romance trilogy to read. Maybe you don't read them back to back to back, spread it out or whatever, but they're good little books. Coffee break. Okay, let's get through this book tag because it's ending up being a little bit long, which is why I'm it's ending up being a bit long, but hey, here we go. We're experimenting with formats. The next book I read is This Could Be Us by Kennedy Ryan. Earlier this year, I did read Before I Let Go by Kennedy Ryan, which was a book club read, and I really enjoyed it. For a romance book, I enjoyed it. So I read the next book in the series. This Could Be Us released earlier this year. I think it was like in like January or February, but I just got around to reading it. I was like, you know what? Let me give Kennedy Ryan another shot because I really enjoyed Before I Let Go. And I rated this book. I did not give you my rating. Hold on. This Could Be Us receives a 4.2 star rating from me. I really enjoyed the book. Let me scroll back up. What did I give Before I Let Go? I gave Before I Let Go 4 stars. So I gave this a higher rating. I sure did give this a higher rating. I did like this slightly more than Before I Let Go. I did. I think I liked the characters a bit more. And the storyline was like real juicy and dramatic. This book follows Soledad, who is a stay-at-home mom. She has 3 daughters. Her children are her world. You know, she prides herself on being a loving wife and a, you know, successful mother. She does have an education and she did used to work. However, she is married to a very wealthy man and she is afforded the luxury to stay at home. However, her husband ain't shit. Okay? And a whole bunch of drama goes down. I'm talking drama. Okay, give me all the soap opera drama goes down. And she divorces her husband. And post-divorce, she now has to figure out how to take care of herself and how to take care of her children. And so the story follows her along that journey of healing from the hurt and trauma from her ex-husband, but also surprisingly and kind of like reluctantly finding love after. So I love the story. I loved it. I think I finished the book in like 2 days. Very enjoyable. What is Kennedy Ryan doing right? In my opinion, from my perspective as someone who doesn't really like romance books, a big thing, Kennedy Ryan has a cast of characters and the narrative circles around the protagonist, who's a woman, and usually her family, whether it be her children, her extended family, her friends. So it's her job. So it's this bigger story going on around our protagonist. And throughout the telling of this story, your protagonist is falling in love. And I really like that about Kennedy Ryan's books, because while it's primarily a romance, give me the soap opera drama of this story that came along with it. So I think that's really big on like my Kennedy Ryan checklist. Second thing I can praise Kennedy Ryan for, something I was complaining about with the Brown Sisters trilogies. While I can hear Kennedy Ryan's voice coming through the pages of the book, this book is a totally separate book than her first book. And I expect her third book to be different as well. So I look forward to that drop, and I'm going to read it. The next book that I read this year, another romance, wrapping up our romance, A Love Song for Ricki Wilde. I reread it because of course I did. This book has already come up in conversation. This book came out in February. It is a book about leap years. It's a book about love. It's a book about flowers. It is a book about music. It is a book about fated lovers. I gave this book a 10 out of 5 stars back in February. And you know what I give this book? A 10 out of 5 stars. I wanted to reread it. When I say I loved this book, I love this book. And as I was preparing to go to Bali for my birthday, I was all like, why not reread the best book of the year? And also I wanted to verify my feelings. You know, you read something and then, you know, you get a bit detached from it, and then you're like, okay girl, it was not that hype. But for me, Tia Williams, I am the target audience. Okay? So like I said, I picked this book up to take with me on my trip to Bali. I did not read nearly as much as I thought I would while I was overseas, but it's okay. I did pick up this book, and I got through chapter 6 while I was in Bali. And it took me a minute to get through those 6 chapters. I was not blowing through the book like I did previously. And coming home from my trip and thinking about this book specifically, and thinking about how I did not pick up this book and I was not compelled to like not put it down, I was thinking, does the book not live up to the hype? We'll see. And so now it's September. I'm back home. I'm chilling. And I pick back up the book and I start strong on chapter 7. Then I'm on chapter 8. Then I'm on chapter 9. Then I'm on chapter 10. And then I hit chapter 11 and I'm all like, oh my God, this book is amazing. This book is amazing. And literally, like, you need chapters 1 through 6 to like build everything up, and then you hit chapter 7 and it just hits the ground running, and I'm all like crazy. If I would have just read one more chapter while I was in Bali, I probably would have finished the book while I was on my trip. But it doesn't really matter when I finished it because I read it for a second time, and I absolutely love it. It is a story about Ricki Wilde. She is the daughter of a very affluent family in the Atlanta area. The Wildes own a chain of funeral homes around the city, and her dad is a really big deal, and her 3 sisters, who are all significantly older than her, are like the 3 Musketeers, and they're like the talk of Atlanta bourgeois society, you know, hashtag Black excellence, all that great jazz. And Ricki, being the youngest, separated by a giant age gap, you know, she's always felt separate from her family. She's always felt very different from them. And also, she never really shared a passion for the funeral home business. Instead, she was always in love with flowers. And so, fed up with how stagnant her life is, fed up with how her sisters treat her, like over her mother, and, you know, wanting to prove something to her father, she packs up her bags, moves to New York, and opens a flower shop by herself. Self-made woman. She falls in love with Harlem. She starts going down memory lane of the Harlem Renaissance. She's making friends, and she's been adopted by this surrogate grandmother, and her life is just taking off and flourishing, and she falls in love. It's such a good book. Being set in Harlem, the book does do a bit of time traveling, so like the majority of the book is in the present 2024. But the book will rewind back every few chapters or so and have a flashback scene in the 1920s. And so you get this New York backdrop in the roaring 20s and the height of the Harlem Renaissance. Glitz, glam, fashion, history, and a pretty flower shop. I love this book. I love this book. I love this book. On my romance hiccups, there is some banter in this book. I caught it the second time around, a bit more of it, and I'm just like, But it's really not that bad, and it's not very often. It's very sparse, and quite honestly, banter is going to exist in a romance book, whether I like it or not. In fact, I will go as far to say that some of the banter in this book I actually do like. I also really like this book because the male protagonist, I'd marry him. I'd marry him. So that's a big part of loving this book. This book has a twist down a particular genre of stories that I really do love, that I eat up. And I don't want to like say it because it's kind of a spoiler. So just read the book and just know that halfway through the book, it's a twist. And the first time I read the book, as I'm reading up to it, there are hints that are being dropped. And like, you can maybe catch it, but not in a, this was obvious type way. Like, no, like, oh my gosh, is Tia Williams really going to be bold and put this twist in the middle of her book? Yes, she is. So, love that. There is no miscommunication in this book. Let me think. No. There's conflict in this book, but it's not miscommunication. That's a big check. That's a big check. I really love this book. I really love it so much that I reread it. It's official. I'll definitely be rereading this book every year. It's going to be a Q1 reread. As this book is set in February, it's the perfect time to reread the book every year. I don't know, maybe one year I'll decide not to reread it, but at this point, it is a reread. Finally, let's pivot away from the romance books, okay? So the next book that we are going to talk about is Legends and Lattes by Travis Baldree, and I rated this book 3.9 stars. Legends and Lattes was a book that blew up in like 2020 when it was first released. It is a cozy fantasy about a orc opening a coffee shop. That's what the book is about. Like, that's what it's about on its most basic level. There's conflict, there's an antagonist, but to the heart of the story, it's about this orc retiring from her contract fighting days and her taking her retirement and opening a coffee shop in a quaint little town. Kid you not. I had seen the cover for this book. It went viral years ago in the heart of 2020. In the heart of coronavirus, when we were all trapped in the house. And I definitely, having now read it, get the appeal of why it was like so beloved in that time period. I feel like it came out at just the right point, but I was just getting around to it. And it was kind of a book that I read on a whim. I was doing a house clean around my apartment and wanted some entertainment. I couldn't really find anything to watch on TV. And I was in this transition period where I didn't have a book to read. That's a lie because I could have read this book, but you know. So I got Legends and Lattes off of Audible, press play. It was like a 4-hour listen that I listened to while I cleaned my house. And it was exactly that. A cozy fantasy about an orc opening a coffee shop. Now, I gave it 3.9 stars. I had to dock it at least a point because while it was a cute book, in my good heart of hearts, I just could not give it a full 4 stars, which is where I feel like it could possibly sit. It's not a book that has a lot going on, but you know this going into the book. That's not what you're requiring out of the book. But when I opened this book, well, whenever I pressed play on the audiobook, I was anticipating, you know, Legends and Lattes. I wanted to hear about a coffee shop. I wanted to hear about, you know, brewing iced coffee and making an espresso. And if y'all ain't know, I used to be a barista and I love coffee. It's the middle of the night and I'm recording a video drinking coffee now. Coffee has no time of day for me, okay? I love coffee. Like, that's why I pressed play on the book, okay? And I feel like the book went harder in describing the pastries than they did the coffee, which Travis, the author, clearly has a knack for descriptive writing, which is great for a cozy fantasy like this. You know, every aspect of the narrative transported you inside this coffee shop, but I could smell the pastries and I could taste the chocolate more than I could smell the coffee. And I was drinking coffee while I was listening to it. So I had to dock it. But outside of that, good story. I would recommend. Okay, and the last book that I read this quarter was Trading in the Zone by Mark Douglas, which I rated 5 out of 5 stars. Now, this is another book that I reread every year. I don't really have a quarter assigned to when I reread this book. I guess I could assign it a quarter, but honestly, it's just whenever the timing's right / whenever I can fit it in. Now, this is a nonfiction book about trading in the stock market, something that I am very interested in. I reread this book every year, and it's less of a book about how to trade in the market and 1,000% a book about mindset. The first time I read this book was 2022. It was recommended to me, and this was right when I was starting my trading journey. I actually started trading in 2021, and I really ramped up in 2022. I was told by the woman who recommended this book that she rereads this book every year. And she rereads it every year, and every year she gets something different out of it because every year she's able to apply new life lessons to it. And so whenever she told me this, I'm like, of course I'm going to read it, but also you're going to reread this book every year. And so I read it the first time, and I took in what I took in. I read it the second time, and I took in what I took in. And then I read it again this year. And this year, I'm not even trading in the market. You know, I just kind of read it to keep that promise to myself. But being removed from my trading journey as it is, and having had time to reflect on the wins and successes, but also the losses and the lessons, along with just retrospect and hindsight 2020, I feel like a totally different person from the first time I read this book back in 2022. No, I am a totally different person from who I was when I read this book in 2022. And I took in this book this year in a way that I don't think I've ever consumed this book. It's a book about mindset and your mindset when you are actively trading in the stock market. But I was also reading it as like a mindset book just for like life. Just for like life. I'm just like, this book is spitting facts. Like facts that I just could not understand back in 2022. So hashtag growth for myself. We love that for me. But also, we're going to reread this book next year. Next year, I am getting back into my trading journey. And it's September when I'm rereading this book. And I don't think I'm going to wait that long. I'm actually thinking February or March will be a good time next year to pick this book up again. So this book will pop back up on the TBR. I mean, Tia Williams, A Love Song for Ricki Wilde, will be popping back up in the 2025 TBR as well. But, you know, until then, I'm really glad I read it. I'm really glad I read it now in this space where I'm not trading in the market. I think that helped with my perspective as well. I can only hope that I carry these lessons with me as I start trading again next year, and I'll read it again. All right, this was a long one. But this was a fun one. So to drop a teaser, at the end of the year, towards the end of December, close to Christmas, I will be dropping another book tag, but this will be a Harry Potter book tag. So, I'm so excited because in Q4, I'm going to have to talk about the books that I've read, and I have read Harry Potter 5, Order of the Phoenix, and I am like halfway through Harry Potter 6. Half-Blood Prince. And at this rate, I'm probably going to read Harry Potter 7, Deathly Hallows, before the year is over. So a big chunk of my book tag will be Harry Potter. And I was already thinking about what I have to say about these 3 books. Plus, I've been listening to these 2 Harry Potter podcasts. And they've been talking about like the first 4 books. And so in a way, I've reread the whole series this year. And so it's a lot of Harry Potter stuff going on in my head that I want to talk about. And I'm like, Lord have mercy, the Q4 book tag is going to be beefy. Because I've been reading books. It's only October and I've read 4. Okay, so we're on a roll. So the solution to this problem is just to have another book tag. So I think this is going to be really fun. This will be the first book tag dedicated to a specific series or a specific book. Maybe in the future there will be other book tags centered around a book or a series. That could be really fun. But I think it's very fitting that the first book tag is going to be about Harry Potter. It makes the most sense. So be looking out for the next book tag drop to happen near Christmas. And then, I don't know, probably in February you'll see a Q4 book tag if I keep up the rate of not being on time in posting these. Until then, Polo.